All right. Hi, church. I just wanted to pop in and talk about mental health today. I'm here with my friend Christina Corey, and Christina and I belong to the same church in New York for 8 years, and she has walked really closely alongside our family, and I'm privileged to call her a friend. And she's also a mental health professional, so she's just here to answer some of our questions today and give us some of her wisdom and some practical tools and tips on how we can stay mentally strong during this time. So thank you so much for joining us. And Christina, thanks a lot for joining me today.
Of course.
Yeah, why don't you just tell my friends here in Vancouver a little bit about what you do in regular life?
Sure. Sure. I am in New York and I have a husband and two kids and a dog. And my job is I provide mental health services to individuals in the community who are looking for some help regarding their emotions, regarding the despair that they're feeling in their life, regarding things that they might be thinking that they have concerns about. And I do counseling in those situations for individuals, family, and some kids.
Wow. And how long have you been kind of working in this field?
I have been in the field for almost 20 years.
Wow, that's incredible. I know I start to add up the numbers too, and I'm like, wow, I've been in pastoral ministry for a long time now. Well, not a long
Yes,
time, but
yeah,
so you also must be doing the working at home and parenting and homeschooling and all of those different dynamics.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I just want to jump right in today because I just want to honor your time and I'm so grateful that you're with us. And I just want to talk, starting off, a little bit about grief. And all of us
Yeah.
are going through, as a culture and as individuals and families, so much loss. Not only loss of freedom, which obviously, as we watch the news, has been really hard, but loss of joy and celebration, loss of life, loss of relationship. I even think of friends that I know that were in situations where they had to go to the hospital and their loved one couldn't accompany them and support them, and obviously loss of life. And so, could you just talk a little bit about how are we supposed to, in a healthy way? Maybe some of us have never taken this step to go to a counselor before.
Yeah.
I personally love counseling and have found it really valuable in my life, but some of us are unacquainted with grieving. And so, what could you just kind of get the ball rolling within us of some of the loss we're experiencing, and how is it that we start to process that in a healthy way?
Yeah, Rachel, that is such a big, big thing right now for individuals. And you listed a ton of different grief scenarios, and everybody has experienced at least some piece of those grief scenarios. So the first part is just to accept and to recognize the fact that it is grief, that it is sadness, it is a loss, um, not to compare it with others. The fact that somebody else may have lost a loved one, and somebody else may have lost their child's sports season. It's
Mm-hmm.
irrelevant to compare those pieces. We are created as different, unique individuals from God. And the fact that we have different, unique experiences is a part of how He has a plan for. So comparing your life or your loss or how you feel about your life or your loss to someone else is completely unproductive. So that's one of the things to be in tune to.
Wow,
Don't,
can I just say I really love that, because I feel like some of us are struggling maybe with how we're feeling, because of our loss being something like a graduation ceremony or a wedding ceremony or a sports season, and we are
mhm.
grieving, but we're then feeling selfish because of our loss not being as serious as someone else's. So I really love what
Right.
you just said.
Yeah, and it's really important to step back, and when we have those feelings, for example, or other situations where we're comparing ourselves to other people during this time, especially when we're isolated from individuals in a face-to-face situation. It's really important to step back and examine your thoughts. What am I thinking about this? What are my thoughts about that person? And to come back to our thoughts are the core of where our emotions come from, and they're at the core of where our behaviors come from. So if my thoughts are that it's not fair for me to be sad about this, or I do not deserve to be as sad as they do, we're going to get stuck in that grief scenario, in that picture where we are not living up to our own expectations for that emotional situation. Again, unproductive from the point that it will get you stuck. It will get you stuck in a thought process that will just spiral downhill, and not at all where God wants us. God doesn't give us our circumstances so that we can be alone in them. In this situation, a lot of our circumstances are overlapping. A lot of the pictures of what people are going through is similar, but that doesn't mean that we handle it the same way, and they're not identical, and that's okay. And it's okay to handle things in your own way as long as you're doing them in a way in which God is at the center of that, and not me being at the center of that.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's really important to realize. So I know in the past, like I've even mistaken other emotions and didn't realize I was grieving. You know, for instance, when I moved from New York, it was such a huge loss of community for me, and I was feeling very low and very depressed for a few months initially after we moved here. Nothing to do with how much I love Vancouver, just the loss of relationships. And it took
Yeah.
me a long time to recognize that it was actually grief. And there's been other times where I've been feeling very angry. And I think, oh, you know, I'm returning to an anger problem that I used to have like 10 years ago. And really only after thoughtfulness and prayer have I realized, actually, I'm grieving. And
Yes.
so I think just to be attuned that we all might be grieving during this time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because grief isn't just about something being taken away. It's about our loss of control. So in all of these situations, what we thought we had control of has been taken away, like that. So it's a very traumatic situation that everybody is experiencing. Again, very differently, but it might be reminding you of something that you experienced at a different part in your life, and not realizing that these things are connected. Maybe it's something from childhood or from another hurtful relationship that you didn't realize. And the fact that you have a lot of time right now to think,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of time to be not, again, face to face with individuals. I mean, everybody think about it and probably would admit that you will say something different in an email or text than you would say in a face to face encounter. Therefore, we are very much the same. We will say a lot of things to ourselves in our thoughts that we wouldn't say to someone else about ourselves out loud. Those situations very much can be consuming in this particular pandemic arena that we are in right now. And you're right, Rachel, that can look like very different emotions to people on the outside. We can display those emotions differently, from irritability to short-tempered, even happiness, what looks like unexpected happiness. That's okay if it's authentic. And that's the most important piece of healthy in this.
Wow. So just if I can pull out and summarize some of what I think you've been saying to us, Christina, is that we have to accept that we're going to go through a journey on whatever grief we find ourselves in, and that we have to manage our own thoughts in the process, and realize that our thoughts are going to have an impact on our emotions and our behaviors. And third, that grief can look different for every person. Did I kind of summarize that right?
I would agree. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so how important do you think, sometimes people reference the 5 stages of grief, and how important do you think those are? I mean, do we have to move through all of those stages, or how do we get to the other side?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I I professionally, my opinion is that those stages of grief do not have to happen exclusive of another. So again, one individual might look like a textbook going through those stages of grief, whereas somebody else might not, and they could both come to a resolution, in my opinion, at the end. However, there are pieces and layers to every single person and every single emotion. And one really good way to have a positive defense to those emotions becoming overwhelming is to just educate yourself. Know that anger is part of losing things. Wanting to bargain is part of it. If if I give up this, then you'll let that happen. Or if I trade you this for that. Oftentimes with God, we're trying to do that bargaining. And it comes back, Rachel, to that sense of control. That if we can say to God, okay, I will give you this if you don't do this. And we take that control back when in the big picture, we don't trust that God's plan has the control, and we don't allow him to. So no, I do not believe that people need to go through those stages of grief in a consecutive, structured manner. And it is important to remember that your grief, the intensity of the losses you're feeling, it will subside. It will not always be as hard as it is now. There will be a different ending than where you feel right now. So how do you know when you've gone through the stages of grief? I believe that you can be in the midst of a very immersed grief situation and still be through the grief. It's a matter of how we process. It's a matter of our thoughts on the situation, of our acceptance of the situation that we're in, and how we're going to proceed with our lives. Despite being in that situation, we can be sad, angry, irritable, frozen in our time, and stay in that loss, stay in that grief for months or years despite the pandemic ending. Or we can look for ways to approach it. We can look for ways to engage with our life. We can look for ways to still be a thriving individual while we're in the midst of it, and not be overwhelmed or overcome with grief.
Wow, I love it. You've said so many things that I need to just continue to think about in my own life, especially this piece about control, because I think this is our society, is that we're so privileged and used to being in control of our own destiny. And COVID-19 has certainly stripped all of that away from us, and left us in a way more vulnerable position. So thank you for those words on grief. My second question is, how do we, maybe we're talking about ourselves, maybe we're talking about a loved one that we have, who struggled with mental illness, anxiety, depression, before COVID-19. And
Sure.
and now we're adding this into the scenario, or maybe there is new instances of anxiety and depression rising because you're in this situation.
Sure.
How can we better support our loved ones, or know how to, if this is rising up within us, know how to kind of chart a path forward if this is something that is appearing in a new way in our life?
Sure. Um, there's a part of that that's an education piece, an education that what the symptoms are, that what the changes are in yourself or someone else that you should be concerned about, and that you should kind of act on. So for example, if an individual is having a withdrawn effect, meaning that even when they're isolated in their home, that they're not responding to others. They're not responding to a text, or they're not acknowledging a letter that was sent, or they're not picking up the phone. And that's different than the way that they have engaged with you in the past. That's something that you should be concerned about. For yourself, that's something you should be concerned about. Having accountability, that you will commit that you are going to check in on someone every day, always, every day, via a text, a phone call, and that you are going to be consistent in that. You sent them, you reached out. Did they respond? Didn't they respond? Also knowing that there are, counselors around you. There are mental health facilities around you. If you have a loved one that was getting services from a mental health facility or a counselor in the past before this started, and you have concerns, you see a change in behavior or a change in the way that they're interacting, it is okay to call their counselor. It's okay to call that facility and say, hey, I just need to share some information with you. That counselor, even if they don't have consent to be able to speak with you, they can take that information in. It is a very different world than we've ever experienced from a counseling perspective. And counselors are trying to figure out how to engage people over this sort of strategy. This platform is very different. So we will take all the help we can get. And if you have a hands-on or you have a more informal connection or relationship with someone, and that is giving you insight that we might not have, call us. Again, I can't say, yes, I know that person, but I can say, I will listen. I will hear what you have to say. And that might be very important to this person's well-being to know. There are also other groups around. There's places that you can get online and do support groups sort of thing, for lack of a better word. There are more confidential ones, more unanimous ones, more ones that are more face-to-face, different groups that are safe, that you can get more support from. And you can always share that with your loved ones, or even you yourself can use those resources. In a way, we have a lot more at our fingertips from a virtual perspective than we have ever had. And it's just a matter of realizing that things have changed. Things are different for us. Again, are we going to stay stuck in the past and wish and yearn for the way things used to be? Or are we going to take a hold of what we have and make it a part of what our future looks like? And for individuals that struggle or that have struggled with depression and anxiety, it's a really challenging spot to be in. It's always another very important piece is that some individuals might have been on medication to help with the brain chemicals being balanced to fight offset mental health difficulties in the past. It's absolutely okay to ask individuals, this is a medical difficulty, okay? If you were to have a loved one or a friend that took meds for being diabetic, you would ask them if they were having problems getting their meds, if they had ran out of meds, if their pharmacy still had their meds. Mental health is a brain disorder. It is absolutely okay to ask them because sometimes people run out of medications and don't realize it. It just kind of goes by the wayside. And that might be something very concrete to have a conversation with about. And for you as well, as a person who may be dealing with something medical, that can affect our mood. That can affect how we are approaching the world and our perceptions as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. I guess I would ask you to speak to, for those of us who maybe COVID-19 has brought on anxiety or depression or something new into our life that was not there before. Some of us who, I'll speak to people who specifically are Christians for a moment. Some of us who have never experienced this before have this idea in our heads that if we really trusted God, we would not be feeling depressed or feeling anxious, and we don't even understand what is happening in our mind and in our body. So could you
Yes.
just kind of speak to that? Because that's a huge, then we start to kind of feel very guilty. And I just think it's a huge issue if this is a new thing rising up for us.
Absolutely, yeah. Rachel, that's a really good point, and a really good, excuse me, thing to talk about even more so in these times, is that part of that goes back to judgment, part of that goes back to our own thoughts. Why do we think that God is judging us? Why do we think that we deserve this, that this is God's punishment? Why do we think that we shouldn't have difficulties in our life? Back to that control piece. We have a stigma around mental health that it falls under a different category of suffering than what things that we would accept as medical. Talks about their suffering, someone talks about their recovery from cancer, or their plan right now, their journey in the midst of cancer. We're alongside them. We're doing for them if we can. We're supporting them. We're loving on them. We're not judging. So individuals that are struggling with things in their brain not working, there are medications that can help for some individuals. It is still an organ in your body.
Yes.
It is still a part of your body. Your brain is absolutely a part of your body. There are things that we do that strengthen our body, and there are times in our lives when we're a lot better at them than other times, right? There are times in our lives when we are absolutely on the nutrition. We are absolutely on top of exercise, absolutely on top of some of these other things that help to strengthen our body and make it stronger and make it function at maximum capacity. Same goes for the brain, the organ. There are things that we can do to help strengthen our brain, to help strengthen our perspective. The fact that we are Christians gives us even more tools, even more resources at our hands to be able to fight those feelings, to be able to, to confront those thoughts head on, because we know who the Creator is. We know who is in charge. We absolutely are safe in His arms. Can we step back and embrace that and let go of wanting to keep our arms around everything and be in control, because that seems more concrete? So for us as Christians, it is not a judgment from God. The fact that you may be or anxiety. You have not created this as something that God has got His punitive finger on. God knows it. God knows what's happening. God knows what's going on. And God will use it in a way that is pleasing to Him, and even more so that is good for you. We cannot assume that it is all about us. Meaning, I cannot assume that when I go through a difficulty, that the only reason I'm going through it is because it's all about me. The bigger picture is that it's about God, and it's about His plan. And when we can let go of the fact that we want the control, that we want to hang on to it, that it's all about me, and go to that spot where we're really vulnerable, and that scary spot of, I don't know what this is about, and I don't know what this means. And letting God take that and letting God do with it what His plan is, huge to being able to deal with and being able to not be overcome by depression or anxiety in these times.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No. I didn't mean to interrupt. You finished your thought.
My only thought, Rachel, on that was just as far as from a tools perspective, scripture, and I know that is going to sound like, oh, that's the easy answer, but replacing your thoughts with God's thoughts, memorizing scripture, memorizing it, putting it on 3x5 cards or whatever paper you have around. Make your environment such that everywhere that you're looking, you have got those words from God right in your face. being aware of what it is you're putting in your ears. Turn off the news. Turn off those automatic updates. There is not anything that you need to know at that exact moment that can't wait. Do healthy things for yourself that you can control. You can turn off the radio. You can turn off the news. You can stop getting on Facebook every 5 minutes. You can. Those are things that will, as I say that as we're on Facebook. However, it can be a tool that can be helpful, right? And it can also be a tool that can be consuming. And then our thoughts are very much overwhelming.
Yes. Yeah. I think that I love so much of what we're talking about, Christina. I mean, the truth of it is that many Christians, people who really trust God, we do go through seasons of anxiety or depression or burnout. And I just want to tear down any stigma about that. And sometimes people even experiencing physical anxiety in their body and not mental anxiety, but it's just a physical response to kind of how chaotic everything is right now. But I think we have to maintain that perspective that that God is fighting for us and fighting for our life all the way through, no matter in good seasons, in hard seasons, he's right alongside us, right? Yeah. And so I'm just gonna try and summarize a couple things I heard you say kind of surrounding this piece about whether just supporting a loved one, or maybe if you're dealing with anxiety and depression yourself. But I hear you saying reach out to someone who has more tools than you do. Reach out to a mental health professional. Reach out, of course, reaching out to friends is always going to be a great step for getting outside of ourselves. But the truth is that there are skills and there are tools that a person like yourself has, or a mental health professional has, that can help us in this time that we may not be aware of because it's not our expertise. So reaching out is really important. And just to educate ourselves in the very practical things that we can do. And I know one thing that helps me stay mentally strong always, but especially if I feel like other areas are chaotic, it becomes even more important for my own mental health, is just physical exercise. And, you know, I know that it has chemical benefits, and I know that it has all kinds of endorphins in your brain. And for me, it just makes me feel stronger. And it's something that's an important part of my own health journey. But there's very practical things that we can do as we talk about keeping ourselves strong. Some things, obviously, if you're a Christian, reading scripture is going to be really important. And some things like exercise are things that we can all take part in regardless of our faith. Are there any more kind of practical steps, maybe as you hear me talk about exercise, are there any practical things that you could point us towards, like you can start doing this today and it is going to have, like for me, I find exercise has an immediate effect on my mood, an immediate effect on my mental perspective. It's one of the most things, like the most just like, I don't want to say a quick fix because a lot of times you don't feel like doing it and it's hard work, but I mean, it's immediately gratifying. And so I've been encouraging our church in Vancouver, stay active and stay plugged in to physical activity during this time. But is there anything else that you could point us towards just as a very practical way to stay strong right now?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you on the being active, outside in the fresh air, getting sunshine when you can, having a gratitude journal, meaning writing down something every day that you're thankful for, a blessing that you see. And for individuals that are really feeling that depressed or really feeling anxious, I would challenge you to set your timer and write something every hour, every waking hour. Look outside of yourself and find something that you can be grateful for. Acts of kindness that has an immediate effect. Very similar from a physiological perspective of what it does in our brain and the chemicals that it releases. very positive to fighting anxiety and depression. And you're going to need to get creative in this piece, in this time, of what exactly an act of kindness can be. Anywhere from, sending someone a letter to a phone call to, again, it is the walls are open. There is no textbook that says this is an act of kindness, this isn't, okay? Think outside of it. Think what your strengths are and think where you can fit those things in to be kind to someone. Journaling, journal, write, okay? The thoughts that are coming in your head, get them out of your head, get them down on paper. It does not have to be a keepsake journal. Oftentimes we just need to have a junk journal. We need to empty the thoughts that are in our head, and then we need to get rid of them. So if you're feeling very overwhelmed, if you're feeling very lonely, empty those thoughts out, get rid of those thoughts, and then destroy that piece of paper. Put it on water, flush it down the toilet, whatever, rip it up. As a symbol, as a concrete exercise that those thoughts don't have control. You're not saving those negative thoughts. You're not saving those negative worries. You're giving them over. I oftentimes have people use the exercise of blowing bubbles. So as you're blowing the bubble, you're putting those worries, those anxieties in the bubble, and the bubble is going up to God. People learn in different ways. People's brains have conceptualization in different ways. So whichever thing works. Getting it out of your brain, though, is very important, and getting it written down. The things that you are concerned about, worried about, and want to be able to think more about or think less about, get them out of your brain, write them down. Very, very helpful. I would also just say, along with that exercise piece, that being aware of your nutrition, again, you won't feel that immediate release of positive chemicals in your brain. However, your brain can't do what it needs to do in a healthy way without good nutrition, without the water that it needs to. And there's very much understanding that your body needs all of those pieces in order to perform at maximum capacity. And that includes your brain and your ability to handle emotions. So be aware of what you're eating, be aware of what you're putting in your body, and tweak it if you need to.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm not even going to try and summarize all of those, but those are really helpful. And I can think of things that even today I can start integrating into my own life that I really haven't considered, because we all have our ways of coping, right? And our healthy ways of coping even, and we need to learn sometimes to expand our box and reach for something new. Something that is also really like a mood lifter or a heart shift for me is music. And so a lot of times if I'm starting to feel tired of the isolation, I just need to pop on some music. And honestly, I feel so much better doing that. Yeah. I have one final question for you. This question actually comes from Chris. And so he just specifically wanted me to ask about how do we kind of move past the fear when we're allowed to regather in the future? And I know that's happening for us in smaller groups here in Vancouver later this month. And in New York, it might not happen for quite a while. We're all on different timelines. But, how do we combat the fear of regathering and yet hold together what I believe the absolute importance of relationships for thriving? And especially as Christians, relationships are so important. And yet there's a lot of there's a lot of fear and trepidation because of COVID-19. How do we move into such an uncertain future?
Yeah, and that is the reality, and that's where things are going to be in that reality as we figure out what and how face-to-face encounters are going to look like going forward. So the first thing that I would say, again, is to be aware of what your needs are. Okay, so if you have legit medical needs, make sure you're talking with your medical providers about what that looks like to protect your physical well-being. Okay, that would be my first right off the bat. I can't do that. I'm not in a spot where I can make a blanket statement. Talk with your providers, your medical people. Is there something that you should be more on top of? Is there something that from a health perspective for maintaining what your medical situation is there something, steps that you should be taking as we delve into? Information is always, education is always a tool that helps us, back to that control piece. That is something that we can take control of. Okay, that is something that we can make our responsibility. So be an advocate, ask those questions if need be. If you are tending to want to be in those groups, but then are shying away from those groups, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? What is the fear about? Where is the fear coming from? Do some journaling about that piece. If you are uncomfortable with the way a group is rolling out, or the numbers in the group, or the situation in the group, again, go back to that journal and write it down. What is the picture? Try to figure out why. Where is that coming from? Do you not trust the people that you're with? Do you have reason to not trust the people that you're going to be with? You know, is this potentially an irresponsible group? Or are you just harboring that lack of control, that lack of, you know, I don't know what this will hold, that unknown. It's important to know what the root is. It's important to know what your reasoning is for that fear, if at all possible. Sometimes, again, in a medical situation, that fear might be rooted in something that is a survival piece. However, there might be other tools that you can bring around that to make that a safe environment for yourself. So be aware of working at it slowly adjusting yourself. Know that other people very much have similar thoughts to you. They're anxious. They're anxious too. They're anxious to keep staying home. They're anxious to go out with people. They're anxious about what that means. They're anxious about if this is going to continue. People are anxious all around you. You are too. Name it. I'm worried. Name it. Come with your friends and the people around you and pray about that. You know, come before your friends and share the scriptures about not fearing. Fear not. God is with you. Don't be dismayed. He is still God. He is going before us. Get with people who are able to surround you and push back at you with those facts, with those truths. Be smart in the steps that you're taking to introduce yourself back into group situations. Know what is the best response from medical perspective, again, from a government perspective, that you aren't going outside of what it is that's been recommended.
Yeah.
That absolutely increases our anxiety if we're trying to tote on the line that
Yes,
from, whether it's right, if am I going to get caught? Is this really clear? Am I going to think about it? Just think about it before you are pushing yourself beyond where it is you're comfortable at for that moment. But make sure you've got truth tellers in your life to help you examine the reasoning why you're having those hesitations or those fears. And don't let yourself continue to have that go around and around and around in your brain without doing something about it, because you will become more and more isolated and more withdrawn from people. And that is not at all, as you said, Rachel, how God created us to be, and not what He wants. We need to be able to think outside and look outside what that has meant in the past to what that will mean for us in the future. Find that empowering. Find that, creative side of you as to what that will mean in connecting with people as you're going forward, and also as you're starting to integrate into group situations.
Yes, and we really need to be here for one another now more than ever. And I think there's times where we feel people that we love withdrawing, and I think it depends on your relationship, but sometimes you have to be really stubborn and say, you're not going to withdraw from me. and you have
Yes.
enough relational bandwidth there to say, you know, I'm not gonna let you sink into isolation. But I just
Yes.
feel this is it's such an opportunity that if we would not become paralyzed by what is going on inside of us, if we could learn to handle that in a healthy way, then there's so much opportunity out there to show the strength of the church and the strength of what it means to have community of, you know, deep vulnerability and deep unconditional love. You can just be loved right where you're at, and that we can help strengthen one another. I always found that to be the most beautiful thing about being part of a church is that you're supposed to lock arms with other people, and when you're weak, they carry you, and when they're weak, you carry them. And we don't all have to be strong at the same time because we're in it together. And so I just enjoyed our conversation so much, Christina. I just thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning here in Vancouver. Is there anything else that you would like to say this morning? I just give you so much thanks, and I just wanted to give you one more opportunity if we haven't hit on something that's come to your mind.
Sure. Well, thank you for asking me to chat, Rachel. It's always fun. Um, I guess the one thing I don't think I hit on along those fun lines is have fun with your life. Do fun things. Bring fun into your home. If you haven't been able to get together with friends, play a game virtually with them. Get your Monopoly board out or your checkers board out. Figure out how you can do that, because you will laugh trying to figure out how you can do that. There are ways to continue to still be silly and have fun, and that is so scientifically proven. So much in our brains to help to heal not only the trauma, to heal grief, but also to give you a resilience to the atmosphere that's around you and that tendency to go towards that anxiety or depression. So I would challenge you all to find something today that gives you laughter, comics, videos, whatever, that gives you pure laughter. And then to challenge you tomorrow to find something that gives you belly laughter. Continue to move up and challenge yourself above and beyond. Then the next day, share it with someone. Share that hysterical clip or that hysterical comment with someone. Continually increase your mode of communication, continually your influence. Influence people for a way that is not pulling us back into anxiety or draining our wholeness and wellness. Continue to let God make you who you are in the midst of all of this, because He is making us all different than we were when we started.
I love that. Yeah, we have to find ways to have fun. And as you were talking, one of the things that came to mind was I was staying with this family once in Seattle, and every Sunday night they would each bring a funny video to their family dinner, and they would do a roundup of the week of everybody would contribute something funny, and they would all sit and partake of it together. And I think we can still do that. And I think that even just saying, hey, we're going to try something new in our family or in our community group, you're right. We have to keep having fun together. Listen, Christina, thank you so much. I just have loved everything in this conversation. And I just wish all the best to you and all the people that I love in New York. And everybody here in Vancouver, I know we're just going to benefit from the hope and the wisdom that you've offered us today.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you for letting everybody over there.
Thank you so much. All right. Church, we'll just remember we're in this together. If you need to talk to someone, please reach out. We're only a phone call away. And you've heard us say this again and again. We may have to physically distance, but we are not socially distanced from one another. We are here for you. We're praying for you. Take some of what Christina has talked to us today about, and just pick one thing and see what God would do even in the midst of this. Stay strong. We'll see you on Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Facebook.